Dober večer in lepo pozdravljeni na še predzadnjem dogodku današnjega dne, kajti po tem bo ob 8. sledila prav tukaj v tej dvorani še najprej podelitev nagrade Zlati repec za najboljši strip letošnjega leta in pa koncert, s katerim se bomo poklonili našemu osrednjemu gostu festivala, Emmanuelu Guibertu. Njegove slike bodo animirane na velikem platnu, zraven pa bo igral Rok Zalokar, džezovski pianist. Toplo vabljeni, da se nam pridružite tudi ob 8. Zdaj nas pa čaka seveda še pogovor z osrednjim gostom letošnjega festivala Tinta, Emmanuelom Guibertom. Z njim se bo pogovarjal Izar Lunaček. Verjetno avtorja poznate kot avtorja Ariola, ki ste ga lahko zdaj že kar nekaj let brali pri založbi Vige Vage knjige. Od letos pa lahko berete tudi Sardino v vesolju in Alanovo vojno, ki pa je šla pri založbi Stripolis. Več o tem pa seveda v prihodnji uri. Izvolite.
Hvala, Pija. Ladies and gentlemen, Emmanuel Guibert! Okay, hey, Emmanuel, great to have you here. Again, we talked about this yesterday.
Thank you.
It's great that you could make it. Yeah, we were a little bit afraid that he couldn't, because like everybody else has left us and you're the only one who didn't leave us hanging and came over, so we hope it's been worth it.
It is indeed. Yeah, I had a marvelous stay. I arrived 2 days ago. No, yesterday. See how intense it has been. I think it's already been 2 days. And today I've been wandering about the city. I went to the castle this morning, to the botanical garden, to all sort of different places, and I have very pleasant times.
Cool. Did you see like the view from the castle? It's nice, huh?
Yeah, we even went outside with Nate. We took his car and went to see a lake. I forgot the name, sorry.
Cerkniško jezero,
Yeah, it was beautiful.
The disappearing lake.
Yeah, it may sound demagogical to say it, but I'm very happy to be here. It's right. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. We're really, really happy that you are here. Okay, so I wanted to take because I know, as we said before, people here know your work mostly through Ariola, which has been a magnificent thing that I think about 6 years ago or so, Vige Vage knjiga started translating it, and it's become a big hit with the kids. And it's so basically here you're the script writer of Ariola, you know. And but at the same time you're just this really interesting author that has an incredibly wide range, and this is what fascinates me about your work. So I wanted to take people a little bit through your career, because I think it's it makes a really interesting story. I love the fact that sort of when did you do this? In your 20s, huh, Brune?
I was 21st when I began this album, and I was 26 or 7 when I finished it. Having worked like hell during all this time, and I wasn't 27 years old at the time, I must say. I was 100 years old. Totally exhausted to have put too many crazy energy, the kind you have when you have this age, in this book. I don't know, I wanted to put myself in jail. That must be the reason why I got into this crazy thing. And I didn't finish the saga, because it was supposed to be a multi-album story, but at least I finished one of them, the first, and decided I wouldn't continue on unless I would die.
Why did it take 7 years? I mean, I saw the pictures inside, everything is almost photorealistic at times.
Yeah. I learned my own job, for the best and for the worst, by doing this book by myself, alone, with no teacher. I stopped studying very early. I've been received in an art school in Paris, but I remained only 6 months in the place. I should have stayed 4 years, and to have the diploma. But instead, I left because I wanted to work, and I received the commission by a publishing house of a story which took place in the Germany of the early 30s, and the subject scared me like hell, and I hardly know anything about this period at the time, but I went to Berlin. It was at the time of the remote time of the wall of Berlin, so I saw the city when it was split in two parts, and that impressed me a lot. I have started actually to write about those memories because I think it's important today to talk about what Europe was. It's not that far, 40 years ago, even a little less. And for instance, I'm today glad to be in Slovenia. I don't know if the story would have continued on like it was at the time, if we would have met at all. And the difficulties for all the people of Central Europe to travel, because they almost couldn't go abroad. Made very difficult the simple fact of meeting each other. And it stopped when I was 25. And 25, it's a generation. When you're 25, you have lived a first part of your life, and an important one. And during these 25 years, I thought I would never meet Eastern Europe. We didn't meet each other.
Yeah, because
we didn't know each other.
So the wall fell while you were drawing Brünn.
Yes, right after that, at the end of this work. So it's been a great shock to all of us, but we have a capacity of forgetting things, which is incredible. Time passes so fast. New generation that arrived, they often don't know the past, especially in countries in which the older generations have suffered. They say, okay, it's over. Live your life now. Look towards the future. Don't look. The past is so depressing. We suffered too much. We don't want to mention it. We don't want to discuss it. And of course, it's understandable, but it's no good solution. We have to be confronted to our past. We have to know where we come from. It's very important. And when there's a gap between generation, because one generation wouldn't talk, because it was just too hard to live through all this, the generation that arrives, if there's always in the generation some who ask questions, they want to know, but it may not be the following generation. It may be sometimes 2 generations after.
Yeah, it can be. I think like grandma's stories are always interesting. You know, your parents' stories not so much.
That's the case, especially if your parents don't want to talk. So.
Although I think, like for instance, here, you know, when there was a war in the Balkans, you saw that like one whole generation was really burdened by this whole war in Bosnia and so on. And it's only and like Sarajevo, like when you visited, had like this slightly depressing feel from people who have been over it. And now I'm meeting this new generation that sort of grew up after the war, and it's actually better. It's good that they forgot. It's good that they didn't experience it, you know, because it gives a new life to the city.
Yeah, it's. Anyway, we forget because we're done like that. I mean, we cannot remember everything that happens to us, and moreover, what happened to others. But we shouldn't forget all.
Of course,
we have to learn history. We have to, and learn history is not only reading books. It's really asking questions. It's wondering what this building was for 1 century ago, what took place there and what happened. And bit by bit, we absorb, we swallow our countries and the whole world history, and have at least a notion of what happened. And we are ignorant. We are ignoramus. There are, of course, a huge majority of things that we don't know and that we'll never know. But we are here to learn until our very last breathing. If we want to do so, we can, because there's always something to learn in any field of the knowledge. But history is certainly an interesting one. Maybe for the main reason that history is full of stories. And we need stories. We incredibly need stories. That's the reason why I can quite successfully do this job, is because there are persons who read my book, my books. And I myself, I'm a reader, because I eat stories. I feed myself with stories every day of the year, every day of my life. I need that. I guess you need that. Whatever you may look to movies or read books or just ask a friend of yours, where have you been and what happened to you? We need that.
But
we need that because all of the knowledge comes from that. It's because we transmit stories that we have a human knowledge. It's because we write them down that they are kept. If we don't do that, we just don't remember.
But you're right, maybe a story is like the best way, out of this dilemma, to still learn from the past, but not be completely traumatized. And, because in a story, even like traumatic stuff becomes aesthetic, and you can still learn from it, but not be completely shattered by it.
Yeah, we need all the aspects. I mean, a good story is a story that traumatizes you if it's traumatizing, but it may also bring you a sense of grotesque or life is like that. Life is always mixed up. And generally good writers and good filmmakers and are persons who can give you a sense of that. Passing from one feeling to another, from one sentiment to another, because that's how it goes. And the richness of stories they generally come from their polyphony, their capacity of being both sad and pleasurable, refreshing and frightening, and etc. Because that's how we are every day. So we just spend 1 hour on one image, and now you got to.
Yeah, no, I wanted to sort of link into it, so I don't go like chronologically, because I think you opened like an interesting topic.
Now
so
DJs,
because you sort of you started with Brun as like one image of the Second World War, which is it's like specific, but it's the sort of thing you imagine. There's a bit of like
it's a very bad script indeed. I don't like this book, but I don't hate it either, because it really taught me a lot of things. I guess I had to go through this strange experiment of putting myself in jail during 7 years at a time when you're supposed to run across the world and discover things. I was in jail, but I guess I needed that.
But did you just work on that, or how did you survive?
I worked on that day and night.
What did you live off then? Because you didn't make enough money off that book to last 7 years.
I lived upon my father.
Okay.
And because I earned something like 20 pence the hour.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you about the transition, because you said you had like this whole experience of Brun was this sort of like suffering, putting yourself in jail, and
suffering and having fun, and having, it's also a mix-up, but suffering for sure. Yeah.
And I know you told me like once it was like a real relief when you finally knocked on the door of that famous atelier Rue de Vosges, where like lots of artists who later became famous were already working there, like Joan Sfar and Louis Trondheim and David B. and so on. Like basically people we now call the French New Wave. And that must have been refreshing. I think it's really nice, like for a cartoonist, to go out of this isolation and start working with other people. Huh?
Yeah, at the end of this book, I felt I was completely sterile. I was dry, and I was old. I didn't have my age anymore. I became some sort of I don't know, the kind of I had turned into paper myself, and I needed to regain life.
Where did you hear about this atelier? I mean, how did you even...
By David B. And he's the author of several magical books. Upon them is Epileptic. I don't know if it has been translated.
Epileptic is also in Slovenian. Yeah.
It's also in Slovenian. It's been translated in so many places, so many languages, and it deserves it. It's a great book. And he's the first one I met, and he's the one who introduced me to the others. And it's been very, very important in my life to meet my generation, to have fun with those incredibly talented persons, and they woke me up. They taught me a lot of things. They entertained me. We loved each other, and we still do.
How long did this last? How long did you stay?
I stayed 5 years in the workshop, in the studio.
Nice.
So 5 years it's a good amount of time. I lived because my friend Alan Cope, whom we saw briefly on one of the images, the American soldier who climbs the mountain, he was dying at the time, so I spent a lot of time with him. And at the same time, I met my wife, who's Italian, so I also spent a lot of time in Italy. So being in Italy or with Ellen wasn't being in this workshop anymore.
Yeah.
So I was paying my rent for nothing, and I decided I would leave. And moreover, I became a father soon after that, and I wanted to be a father 24 hours per day, because people who work at home have this fabulous opportunity to see their children growing up day after day, because we live here all the time, so we can be all together. And I wanted to leave that, and it's been very important also in my life. So all of this made me go out of the workshop, and I never came back, which doesn't mean that I never will. Who knows? It's been such an important experiment that I may feel once again in my life the urge of coming back in such a structure. That may come, I don't know. It's not the case for the moment. I'm still... but working by yourself after such an experiment is different than working by yourself before you ever had that, because you're never really alone anymore. You really had the experiment of being surrounded by the others, and you perfectly know what it brought you, and it's like having the ghosts still around you as you're working.
Yeah, you probably hear their voices in your head. I mean, the possible criticism or the inbuilt.
Yeah, and plus, most of my books are books of cooperation with artists, with script writers, with graphic designers, with persons that I meet and whom I ask to give me their testimony or etc. So I passed from this solitude of the beginning to a life which is full of friendship and exchanges and So I guess the decision of going into this studio has launched that in my life, because I had been too shortly in art school to have the same kind of feeling.
Yeah, like you said, they were your professors, basically. I mean, everybody was everybody's professor in that studio.
Yeah, it was a school without teacher, yes.
And it seems to me, like, I mean, the way I followed the chronology, it seems that, like, you really had to rest from the solitary work by just doing the drawing part of the stories for a little while. It seems like, because I see that in Slovenia as well, like, some people on the scene, like, you know, David B. and Svar, are just people with just ideas flying out of them all the time. And they just need if somebody else wants to draw them, it's great. And I can see you're collaborating in the beginning with David B. and Svar, who are just like machines of ideas coming out of them. And it's interesting, and you seem to like sort of have regained, you know, like Blaine, for instance, you know, Christophe Blaine, also did like his first couple of books with David B. and with Svar.
Exactly.
And then that sort of taught him to be able to do his own stories on his own. And now he loves doing his own stories.
Yeah.
So was it like that with you? Was it like a sort of therapy to work on David's and Joan's ideas?
Leading, let's call it an artistic life, is always a therapy. In any case, I mean, giving oneself the possibility of expressing yourself, it is so important. I mean, you may decide to pay your shrink to lay down on a sofa and tell your life. That may help, but you can make a living out of it if you just write it down or turn this into comics or movies. And so I do this job because it used to do me good as a child. I mean, I was, I don't know, maybe 3 years old or even 2 when I started to draw, and I felt, and I still feel today, the excitement that it brought me, the erotic pleasure, erotic in the exception of the life, the pleasure of being alive, and just taking notes about that. Incredible experiments. We are alive. That it seems like since the dawn of times, writing stories consists in saying, "Hey, man, we're alive."
But it's interesting, right? That you feel more alive when you express being alive. You know, like just living directly doesn't quite live up to life.
I wish it could. I wish it could if I wasn't crippled, but we are crippled. I guess I am at least. I need to tell stories because it's just not enough to. From time to time, I have a nostalgia of a life which would be only, I don't know, waking up, going outside, having a short conversation with someone, and cutting my roses and eating my soup, and that's it. Why do I have to tell it? I don't know, but it comes from the fact that as a child, I already felt that if I didn't express what I've been through, my life was unbearable. I couldn't bear the burden.
It's a necessity, really.
Yeah. If I couldn't come back from school and say to my mother, listen to what happened to me today. And if right after in my room, I wouldn't have had the opportunity of drawing what I couldn't tell my mother, I just couldn't have stood it. I mean, it would have been unbearable. So that's the main reason, because I guess we write, we talk, we draw, it's because we have this need to share those experiments, just maybe to check whether you have the same, more or less. If you're like me, or if I'm a monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Or,
It's part of a communication. I mean, it serves you well because it's therapeutic, because you get it out and you see it yourself. But then when you get reactions from other people who go like, wow, this is exactly how I feel,
yeah.
you get a lot more of that, and it's wonderful.
I guess it's only good, except that you can always poison yourself, and it depends on the proportion of, it depends on the way you use this tool of telling stories. You can use it badly. You can kill yourself with that. You can increase your
through stories. Okay,
your neurosis. You can increase your life can become worse than what it was.
Can you give me an example of that?
But that happened to me. I mean, when I've done this book, this 7 years work, I got out of it completely exhausted. I mean, that was too much. I really poisoned myself with that.
Yeah.
And but I saw it. I had this sort of extreme behavior in me, capacity of drowning, immersing myself completely into work, and put me in danger. That impressed me, but I said, okay, if I keep on going in this way, I'll die before 30. If I use this energy a bit differently, that may be interesting, because the energy, I know I have it. If I use it properly, my life could be better. So you write stories, you draw stories, but you learn how to drive yourself. I mean, that's the real purpose. Stories are alibis. One thing we want is to walk through this life without tumbling down or falling down at every step. So we have to know how to walk. And learning how to walk, you can do it with the artistic experience. If you learn how to sing, if you learn how to dance, if you learn how to cook, if you learn how to... I mean, when I say artistic, I should say craft. I mean, producing something to know who you are. What are your capacities, what you can do. Not dreaming about doing things, but do things to see whether you can do them. And the first thing you realize is that you can partly do them, but there's always a problem. So you try to fix it. And fixing the problem in a comic, on a sculpture, or on a symphony, it's curing yourself. It's fixing up within you your capacity of exigence, of righteousness, of your desire of being proper, being...
Also, I think there's sort of a difference when you sort of escape into like very, very articulate stuff. You sort of escape from life, because I did that for a while as well, doing stuff that has lots of like little lines and everything, because you can't really stand your life, and that's sort of escape, and you get good stuff out of it. Whereas like the stuff you did later just seems very different. I mean, especially like the stuff you're very famous for, like the... Like La Guerre d'Alan, which we did, is completely different. That's a real work of communication. It's constantly connected to Alan's story, and to just talking to him and trying to get that out, and that's a completely different thing, I think. Trying to like doing a biography of friends, you know, it's really catching life as you lived it, as you heard it,
And it's also the ambition to spend a lifetime telling one story. But if I would have continued on at the pace which was mine when I was 20, a lifetime would have only served me to tell 1 year of his life.
Yeah.
So considering that I want to tell his life and some others and doing all sort of other jobs, I had to change completely my way of. That's interesting. You realize that you're in a dead end street, and you have to go backwards, and you have to refine your way and go to another direction. And this is also learning how to live. Now I'm sorry, my ass is completely wet because I have to do this.
Damn.
Look at this.
Wait, I'll give you a handkerchief.
Oh, thank you. He has everything.
There you go.
My diaper. Do you understand this? That's okay? Because...
Yeah, everybody, like in Slovenia, they mostly speak English quite well. So
but do you understand my English? Okay.
Trust me, we had like the likes of Louis Trondheim here and Bastien Vives who speak like completely French English, and everybody basically understood them.
Okay,
so it's okay. I wanted to ask, since we have Alan's war here out now, and I wanted to say at least a few words about it. What sort of fascinates me about it, like some people don't really get this book. They go. It's, like I said before with Brun, Brun is like some stuff that, it's very original, but there's still like, there's stuff you imagine about the Second World. You got Hitler, you got Berlin, you got this sort of stuff. And here it's you think, okay, this is about a soldier. It's going to be like the Band of Brothers or D-Day, there's going to be lots of fighting and people dying in the trenches. Not really in the trenches like in Tardy, but you get it. And the amazing thing is here, there's very little fighting. There's like the one couple of times that he's in danger, it's when you completely don't expect it. It has nothing to do with fighting. And there's a lot of this like very, very nice observation, incredible stuff that this particular individual that was Alan Cope is just capable of perceiving. It's basically about this experience of the Second World War, which is nothing like we're used to in the Second World War mythology, but which is incredible because of him, because he's such a subtle observer.
I guess the reaction coming from readers that pleased me the most was when some readers told me the most beautiful thing in these series of books, it's your friendship. And that is strange if you think about it, because I'm not in those books. I don't appear, except that I wrote some preface, some foreword for the book. But there are books in which some friend of mine interview someone, or we all know Maus by Art Spiegelman, for instance. You see Art himself having discussion with his father, etc. It's an important part. It's a crucial part of the book. I decided since the very beginning that I wouldn't be in this book. The main character, the narrator, the only persons that we follow is Alan himself. So, but I've been charmed when for the first time, I heard someone saying the beautiful thing about those books, it's your friendship, because of course those books are the natural fruit of a friendship. It's because I really had a crush on this man and spent countless hours with him during the 5 years life left us to be together.
And you were like really ages apart, right? He was what?
We were ages
30?
apart. He was between 69 and 74. He died at the age of 74. And I was between 30 and 35. I met him on the 16th of June 1994 on a tiny island off the Atlantic shore of France, where he had retired. So he started to tell me those memories, and just like you did, I noticed it didn't look like a Clint Eastwood or a Tom Hanks movie. at all. It was completely different from everything I've heard about, seeing movies or listening to or reading stories about Second World War. But there was a perfume of truth. There was a materiality of things that was for me puzzling. If that was that made me such an effect that I was. I had this reaction was to draw because I saw the images. I saw what he told me, and I could rush home after our conversation and start to write down and to draw what I had heard 1 hour before, because it was so beautiful and so vivid and so pedagogical and so close to life, so realistic that simply it was like dictation. I could draw, listening to this voice, I could draw the landscapes, I could draw the cities, I could draw. For the military vehicles, I had to gather some documentation, but all of the rest was really incredibly. I mean, there wasn't any blur in his testimony. I could see things.
Although what I like is also that it's drawn in the way that there is this blur of memory. You know, there's a lot of whiteness, and I think you talk about it in the introduction. You leave these blank spaces open. I mean, if this was done realistically with everything drawn in the background.
That's right. That's right.
I think it's wonderful. That's a great part.
I avoid a lot of things because he talked a lot. But paradoxically, he wasn't a man of so many words. He talked a lot because he had a lot to say. But every anecdote was very well cut, carved. There was some sort of literary perfection in what he was saying. Later on, I understood why. I guess it's linked with an episode which I tell in the book. At the age of 50, he, like all those soldiers, had the possibility of retiring. I mean, 10 years prior than usually, because he had been on Second World War as a youngster. So the problem is that his wife was still working at the time, so he had to stay by her side in Germany, where both were living and working for the American Army bases in Germany. So he decided he would be, how do you call that, convoyeur de fond?
He drives this sort of van, or no?
The one who drives the money and the documents for the army. And so it wasn't really official. He had some sort of very mundane Volkswagen van in which he would carry a lot of money, a lot of precious documents, etc. But no one knew. He's never been attacked. And he would spend his whole days driving through this area of Palatinate in Germany, and he soon get very bored, and also very unhappy of himself, very depressed, to tell the truth, because he disagreed with his own life. He didn't match with his own life anymore. He had been through a lot of difficulties and he wasn't happy with him. So he decided consciously to auto-analyze his own mind by day after day, while he was driving, telling himself chronologically his own story, which is a strange decision. I mean, we have to be very unhappy and also, in a certain way, very free to do so, because he had a huge amount of time by driving. So he decided
he was taking stock of his life, literally, taking account of his life.
Exactly. So that was he has done, day after day, week after week, month after month, and he taught him a lot. He taught himself a lot about his own life just by telling it. And I guess it has been like writing down a book without writing. So when I met him almost 20 years after, he just had to reopen this book because the stories had already been told by himself to himself. But I've been the first, of course, to whom he told such a huge amount of stories, anecdotes, informations about his life.
Oh, you were like his first reader of this.
I was the first reader of this virtual book, and but considering that it was a book, because right since the beginning, the way of telling it, the voice, the words, the atmosphere he succeeded in creating around him was so captivating for me that it took me, when I said, let's make some books together, we had known each other for a week, which is not that much.
Okay.
So it came right when we met. I mean, right in the beginning. I said, let's do, and very naturally he said, yes, why not? Like if he had been waiting for that. And I tell you a short anecdote. When he died, he gave me, just before he died, he gave me some sort of all sort of papers and correspondences he had in his files, in his desktop, because he didn't want that to be destroyed. And I thought I could use it as a storyteller. I thought it would be important to have that. So I saved all of this. Among this are poetry that he used to write. And he was a beautiful poet. I can tell you, for instance, one poem in English, which is called Warp Revealed. And the poem says, suddenly I see a chain of love, and all these loves could have been wonderful if I had animated them with myself. I see, after having lived blind, that having always been deprived of love, I have ever managed to have one before me, day after year after decade, a love there and unknown, in the midst, caressable and uncaressed, and yet joining link into link after hold, a whole life of could have been most worthy. Indeed, a chain of love, a good one. So it sounds...
No, it does encapsulate this, this yearning, this feeling of like slight, could have been,
And what I meant to say is that among the poems that I found in his personal papers, one of them was dedicated to Gerhard, who is a pianist that we meet in the book, and who has had a crucial importance in his life. Although they litigated, although they have been separated for years, he remained as some sort of example and sparring partner and someone who impressed him deeply. So when Gerhard was old, they had about a little more than 20 years of difference, the two of them, maybe 25 years, something like that. So when Gerhard was old, he lived in Mexico with his wife, Vera. And becoming blind and getting closer and closer to death, Alan would send him some letters to support him. And Gerhard, with the slight view he had, he answered, copying till the very end for Alan all sort of texts and poems that he appreciated to edify Alan, to teach him things. So Alan wrote a poem for Gerhard saying, Gerhard, don't worry, someday a 30-year-old man will come and visit you. He'll climb up your street, he'll stay with you, and he'll be the one who will listen to your own story and turn it into something that will do you good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen to Gerhard, but this is exactly the program of our friendship. So 20 years before he met me, he described this 30 years old man. That's silly. I'm not a man. I don't buy any supernatural stories because I think all life is supernatural anyway. So this is one of the among the 1,000 examples in my life or of strange coincidences, but it certainly is one. He described what has happened to him 20 years after the day I climbed, because I had to climb, indeed, his street to reach his house. And I asked him for direction in the street. That's how we met. He was sawing wood in front of his house, of the kitchen door, which was opened. And he was... And I got closer. I pretended I was asking for directions. To tell the truth, I wasn't lost. But as I often do, I engage a conversation because I'm incurious by someone or by a house. His house was beautiful. I wanted to look inside, to have a peep inside. So I said, please, where is the Place de la République, please? And that's how it started. So this day, I've been the young man of the poem.
That's great. That's it sounds almost mystical, but it's a serendipity. It's a serendipity again.
That's well said. I recitated you a poem in English. He also wrote nice poetry in French, directly in French, because his French was flower. It was really a very nice French spoken by a stranger. And that means generally much more literary than the French of actual French speakers, because a lot of words have been learned through readings of literature of maybe, I don't know, medieval age or 19th century. All of this makes a mix-up, which is a very precious language, very flowered, with a will to be accurate, a will to be correct. And sometimes when we were taping, he would stop the tape recorder. I still hear it today when I re-listen to the tape. I hear, that means he's searching for a word. And it can take 5 minutes until he finds it, but it has to be the good one.
Because he told you all of these stories in French.
Almost all the stories have been told in French.
Yeah.
The words, there's not one word in these books that I have invented. What happened is that sometimes I have knitted together different versions of the same anecdotes, because he could tell me something in 94 and then retell it in 97, maybe forgetting that he already told it, or etc. And making a comparison of the two versions, I can see that one sentence in one was better than the other, etc. So this cut-up work, I do it, but the words are always his, because I want to be an evangelist. I really want you to listen to him. I want you to be in my shoes when I was listening to him. I want to give you my seat behind him. That's the reason. That's the only reason why I'm not in these books, because I want you to be at my place. I don't want to be between him and you.
And the book also finishes wonderfully with like this little color section where you take the reader.
I take the reader to the place where I was seated.
Yeah.
I don't say it in the book, but you understood it. That's the moment when I say goodbye, and he says goodbye. And at the same time, that's a moment when I lead you to the place where all of this has been told.
It's wonderful. Well, we have only like about 10 minutes left, so I want to give like a chance to the audience to ask something as well. So go ahead if anybody has like a question for Emmanuel.
After having said a poem, I can maybe sing you a song that he taught me.
Yeah, because you wanted to be a musician, right? I mean, that was one of the...
He introduced me to Stephen Foster, who is he's a man who died young at the age of 38. He lived around, let's say, in the 19th century, around 1850, 1860. And he wrote, among, still today, the most popular songs in folk history in America. And Alan's mother had a songbook by Stephen Foster. And someday, it was raining, I remember. We were in the little cabin when we would tape our conversations in the center of his tiny and beautiful garden. And the heater was on because it was end of October. It was more or less this period of the year. And he said, "Today we're not going to tell stories. I want to sing songs to you." So I said, "Shall I tape?" He said, "Yes." So I recorded, and he opened the songbook, and he sung me this day something like 8 or 9 songs. And then I lost those tracks for years. I rediscovered them because I hadn't put them with the testimonies, because I felt, okay, I cannot use them in the stories, so I put them aside and forgot them. And one day I re-listened to all of that with great emotion. I remember that when he sang those songs to me, this day, I don't know what happened to me, I felt he was out of tune during all the session. And when I re-listened, I realized that I was wrong. He sang very well. But something very emotional is that the last song from Stephen Foster is called Aloha Oi, which is like Polynesian. saying, meaning goodbye.
Okay.
And the song says, now it's time to say goodbye, and in parting my heart will start to cry. As you're leaving this lovely island home, we were in an island, this heart of mine follows you where you roam. So, and it was the last song that he taped this day. And when I re-listened to it years after his death, the last one was, now the time, with his voice, now the time has come to say goodbye. And in parting, my heart will start to cry. As you leave this lovely island home, this heart of mine follows you where you roam. Aloha, oi, farewell to thee. While you're away, I'll pray for your returning. Don't remember the rest. I may remember better one, which is shorter, and it's very charming, and it's called Beautiful Dreamer. Beautiful dreamer, waken to me. Starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee. Sound of the rude word, heard in the day, lulled by the moonlight, have all passed away. Beautiful dreamer, queen of my song, list while I woo thee with soft melody. Gone are the cares of life's busy throng. Beautiful dreamer, awaken to me. Beautiful dreamer, awaken to me.
Woo! And that's from the same author. This is the same. It's the same songwriter as the first one. Wow, it's beautiful.
He's very famous. He's the one who wrote "Come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee."
Oh, okay, that's very perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. This was
Thanks a lot for staying, for being here, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you for coming over. It's been lovely having you.